Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Robert E. Howard's Mythmaker. This is from 1998. Apparently the Robert E. Howard estate, for the first time in its history, was like, we're going to make our own comic company. Instead of licensing Conan and the various characters that Robert E. Howard created to other companies, which they did for decades, they were like, we're going to start our own company called Cross Plains Comics, and we're going to put out our own comics. I guess in the introduction, they tell us that they were going to get Conan back from Marvel, and that would have been, I imagine, the moneymaker. But that fell through. So I guess Marvel's contract, they had it for another year or two. So they couldn't get Conan, which would have made this sell. I don't think this sold at all. I found this in a comic shop back then. I was just like, what the hell is this? What a weird, like 1998, John Bolton, Tim Sale, Richard Corben, Kelly Jones, and this company I've never heard of. It was pretty weird. But even though they put out like 5 titles, they had all that money. The Robert E. Howard money from all the Conan movies, Conan licensing, Conan paperbacks. So they could get the best artists in the business. And they got a lot of good ones. And it's a really beautiful production. It's like nice cardstock covers, slick paper. It's a really nice publication. It's $6.95. And it's kind of worth it. Because even back in the late 90s, this is basically like a small graphic novel as far as production values, even though it's not square bound. It's still very nice, just beautifully produced. So we start off with this very designy cover. Raphael Conan, the longtime Conan artist, he was the designer of this whole company. And, you know, for a guy who draws Conan, just very savagely, kind of following in Barry Windsor Smith's footsteps, he's got a pretty slick design style. This doesn't look like something that would have, you know, Robert E. Howard in it. It's kind of I don't know, classy? Is that the word I'm looking for? It's kind of classy. And that's Raphael Conan's design. We start off with a little inside front cover by Raphael Conan. This is years after he had already been drawing Conan for Marvel for years. Savage Sword of Conan and various other titles. And I'm sorry, this is 1999. This was published. We have a beautiful John Bolton painting. You know, you can imagine that's Conan, I guess. You know, you don't know. Nice introduction from the editor, just giving the whole background on how they started this company. Table of contents has a nice little sketch by Michael Kaluta. I don't know if this is an old sketch or a new sketch or what. I have no idea. If he made this just for this book, or it was just some Robert E. Howard inspired drawing Kaluta did 30 years ago. Who knows? A nice little article by Roy Thomas talking about, you know, his part in bringing Conan the Barbarian to comics in the first place back in 1970-ish. And a lot of interesting little facts in here and stuff. Once again, a little Kaluta thing. I guess that's a sketch. This guy's hand. So they have a framing device in this. By the way, every story in this is written by Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas loves Robert E. Howard. So if somebody's going to be doing a Robert E. Howard thing, he wants in. And this framing device is drawn by Tim Sale and Matt Hollingsworth on colors. You probably know him from, you know, Hellboy. One of the best colorists in comics. Beautiful colors in this. And, you know, this is like really nice paper. So the colors really shine. And basically the framing device is these 4 people are summoned to this weird tower. They don't know why. They don't know who summoned them. but they all felt this calling to come here. There's like two normal looking dudes, this weird minstrel, and this like moon goddess. These guys all seem kind of unfazed by the fact that there's a fucking moon goddess. They're just like, oh, you got invited too. Instead of like dropping on their knees and being like, oh my God. Yeah, I like Tim Sale. It's got that very simple, cartoony style. So the first guy tells his story. He basically says, I've been reincarnated a lot of times. I remember all of my past lives. And one of the past lives he remembers is when he was a caveman. And this is a way to get one of Robert E. Howard's stories into this, Spear and Fang. But the most important thing about the story is they got Richard Corben to draw it. Unfortunately, he didn't color it. It's this guy, Eric Hope, who's pretty good. But, you know, when it comes to color, nobody's Corben. It's not going to be as good as Corben doing the coloring. So we see this caveman who's one of those, like, cave artists, you know, like in those caves in France. And this young woman is watching him. She's kind of in awe of his skill. Because that was like magic back then. Guys who could draw. But really nice Richard Corben art. The coloring is kind of, I don't know, late 90s computer coloring. It's not nearly as good as what Corben would have done. So I guess in this civilization, this tribe, it's taboo for women who are unmarried to be hanging around men. So she runs away when the artist guy sees her. He hears something, he goes out, she runs. But then this other guy from the tribe, he just assaults her and grabs her. He's definitely not a gentleman. Look at this beautiful fucking Corben foliage. He didn't have to do that. He could have totally fudged that. But, you know, Corben, even at this point, Corben's what, pushing 50? I think. He's still this diligent, this hardworking, and as a cartoonist. So the guy, you know, who's abducted this young woman, he's taken her into the forest, and then a Neanderthal attacks. There's still a few Neanderthals left. Basically, the Cro-Magnons, who superseded the Neanderthals, they kind of killed most of them off because they're smarter, but they're not nearly as strong. But using their bigger brains and better tools and weapons, they pretty much killed most of the Neanderthals. But there's still some out there, almost like Bigfoot. You always got to worry about a Neanderthal because they're cannibals. They'll just eat you. So the Neanderthal attacks this rapist, and he totally kills him. I love this, how he's just stomping on him, just showing how primal he is. I guess these colors are pretty good. It's just some of this computeriness, But, you know, as far as the color choices, it's pretty nice. I think Corben would have made better color choices. So she's running away now. She doesn't want to be killed by the Neanderthal. And the artist caveman has been following her. And the Neanderthal has captured her and takes her back to his cave. He doesn't attack her yet. He basically just goes to sleep with her. And she's just like, oh, shit. What the fuck? What's going to happen? So he comes into the cave. The Neanderthal attacks him. But, you know, even though he's not nearly as strong, he's got speed and intelligence. And he bests the Neanderthal. And takes his axe and just chops him right in the skull. Chops the skull in two. And he grabs, well, it doesn't grab her, you know. embraces the young woman and says, "What I have fought for, I will keep." Which is, Robert E. Howard wasn't that enlightened. Definitely not Corben colors here, but pretty nice. Pretty nice and rich color. Oh, it's just so nice. At this time, Corben wasn't doing much. So it was kind of a coup for them to get him. Especially to draw Robert E. Howard, who's born to draw that shit, right? So now we're back to the framing sequence. Tim Sale art. Very nice. The moon goddess. She's telling her story now. And this is the story of the dream snake. And this is drawn by Tim Sale. And we see this old guy. And he's kind of triggered just by the wind going through the grass out here. They're in the Midwest. Maybe they're in Texas. Whatever. And he's like, "Yeah, guys, I've never told you this, but I've been haunted by the same dream ever since I was a young man. And whatever's going on outside tonight, the weather, it's reminding me of it." So I guess every night he dreams this. He's in the African veldt, or the grasslands, or whatever you call it. And his gun is broken. We don't know why. And he comes back to his little shack. And his Hindu servant / roommate is gone. There's no blood or anything. Nothing's been stolen, so it's not like African tribesmen have raided it. So he's just like, what the hell? And then he realizes, because he saw this, the grass outside his place. He noticed when he came up that there was a trail through it, as if somebody had dragged something through the grass. But he puts two and two together and realizes it was a giant snake. That's why there's no blood. This snake probably came, abducted his buddy without, any bloodletting, and just took off with him. So he's just terrified. He's almost petrified in terror. And he waits and waits for the snake to come. He's got no rifle, remember. His rifle's busted, so he's kind of defenseless. He might have some little knives or something, but... So finally he makes a getaway. He's just like, okay, as soon as if I make it through the night, when the sun comes up, I'm running. I'm not going to stay here another night where the snake can get me. So he just runs like a bad man. And he runs so hard and fast. He just runs as hard as he can. He collapses for a little while and then runs again. That's how terrified he is. And the sun is slowly setting, so he's running against the sun. And he says that, I've had this dream every night, and every night the snake gets closer and closer. The waving of the grass marks his progress, and he nears me with each stream. And when he reaches me, then... And so without a word, he enters and goes to bed. And all of them run to his room late at night. They hear a horrible shriek from his room. And his friends run to the room. He lay dead upon the floor, as if he had fallen in some terrific struggle. But his face was terribly distorted, as the face of a man who had been crushed by some superhuman force, such as a gigantic snake. So it's a nice little, kind of like a ghost story almost, Now we see this weird minstrel guy, and he has all these lyrics. He just sings these songs, and I think they're Robert E. Howard poems that they kind of shoved in, using him as a device. And basically we get a little kind of a poem by Robert E. Howard about Stonehenge and the primitive people who, built it. It's called Men of the Shadows. And I think this is Kelly Jones. I believe it is. I'm sorry, this is John Bolton. And now we see the last guy in the framing device. And he's telling his tale. Dermod's Bane. And we see this young man, this young Irish man who returns to Galway. His sister died. His twin sister. And he loved her as he had never loved anyone else. So he's devastated. He doesn't even know how to keep on living. Did I mention this Kelly Jones art? I don't think I did. Yeah, I love Kelly Jones. He's like Bernie Wrightson's heir apparent. And this is some really nice Kelly Jones art. So his grandmother her grandmother is almost like a witch. She's kind of witchy. She has all this knowledge. And she's like, you got to go back to Galway, where our people are from. And she gives them some history. She says there was the chief of the Clan O'Connor, and his name was Dermot, but people called him the Wolf. And his people were kind of like the ruling class, the ruling tribe, back in Ireland in that day. Back when Ireland was like pagan. And this guy is like, there's all these clans, but he like didn't even give a shit. The Normans were invading at the time. And he'd kill the Normans, but it'd also kill his own clansmen or the other Irish guys. He was just a monster. He would go around the countryside just like, killing anyone who came upon him just for fun. And going around just raping women, it sounds like. It says commits atrocities on the womenfolk, but it looks like he's just going around raping and pillaging anyone, even his own people. It finally comes to a head when he kills this Irish kid. And this is a different clan. So the Kirawan clan. And they set out and they're like, oh, this fucker's dead. And they succeed in killing him. One of the Kirawan clans. Am I saying that right? Kirawan. One of the Kirawans killed, and I think it's Michael Kirawan, which is the name of the guy who's telling the story in that room, in the framing device. So he's a direct descendant. Not only was he like totally mortally wounded, but just to make sure they hung him from a tree right on this cliff. The tree is still there. It looks like a gallows. It's this weird gnarled tree. He's learning all this as he travels through Galway, just from talking to long-term residents. And as he's walking through the woods one night near that tree, something flitted in front of him. He thought it was a wolf, even though there hasn't been wolves in Ireland for centuries. And then he sees this apparition. It's his sister, his twin sister. Beautifully drawn by Kelly Jones. Let me just, I had to go back for a sec. I thought I missed something. Nope. Okay. And it's almost like she's luring him to that cliff. And he wakes up just in time. He's like teetering on the edge of the cliff. But he's actually about to fall off. And then he sees that the apparition of his twin sister turns into Dermot O'Connor, that bastardly guy. So he was basically tricking him. And it's too late for him, it looks like. He's going to fall over the cliff. He's off balance. He just went a few inches too far. And he's falling over. And then all of a sudden a hand grips him. There's no one there. And just from the grip, he knows it's his sister. He knows that grip. He's held his sister's hands thousands of times. So finally, this incident basically gets him over his horrible grief. That's why he came back to Galway. He just couldn't face life without his twin sister. But now he knows, you know, she's there somewhere in the cosmos. And, you know, when he dies, he'll be able to embrace her once again. And look at this fucking gorgeous Kelly Jones shit. It's his sister in the ghost realm. But this is like classic, like turn of the century. I mean, turn of 2 centuries ago. This is like Joseph Clement Cole, shit like that. The golden age of illustration. Beautiful stuff. Oh, nice. Just Kelly Jones. I mean, sometimes, he's so cartoony. Look at this hand here, these fingers. It's like completely cartoony. Kind of ridiculous, taken out of context. But Kelly Jones makes it all work. It's almost like he's Bernie Wrightson, but to the 10th degree. Because Bernie Wrightson would have a little cartooniness to his gruesome horror comics, but he'd pull it back. And it wouldn't be... Sometimes Kelly Jones, it almost looks silly, but it all works. Like, just... Look at this guy. He's got no chin at all. It's like kind of a caricature. But it looks great. Excuse me. So now we're back in the framing device by Tim Sale. That's the end of that story. And it's almost like a preview of what's coming in this comic. It's basically saying there's other realities, there's other cosmoses, there's other dimensions, and we will look at them soon. So we see these glimpses of stories that Cross Plains Comics will explore. And the whole time they've been asking, who brought us here? They've even been accusing each other, like, did you summon us? I'm like, no, I'm just as in the dark as you. And then we see that Robert E. Howard at his typewriter. There's a map of the Hyborian age behind him. And it's one of his poems, which is very apropos because you probably know Robert E. Howard committed suicide at a very young age after his mother died. He was a tough guy, but he was kind of a mama's boy, very much a mama's boy. And when his mom died, he just couldn't go on, and pretty soon after killed himself. It's actually kind of a nice poem. Excuse me. I am rest from hate and pride. I am friend to king and beggar. I am Alpha and Omega. I was counselor to Hagar, but men call me suicide. Almost basically like suicide's not this malevolent force. It's just like, hey, it's a nice release. Sometimes life's hard. Some people just don't want to go on. I gotta get some water. Excuse me. So here we have a nice gallery. Mike Kaluta. Mark Schultz. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs fame. Or I guess Xenozoic Tales, depending on if you read the comics or watched the cartoon. Pretty nice illustration. This Kaluta is not as impressive as I hoped. You know, I think by the late 90s, Kaluta wasn't really the Kaluta that we all loved in the 70s and early 80s. Sorry about that. Here's Steve Lytle, pretty damn good superhero artist from the 80s, who by this point wasn't doing shit. So it's almost like Steve Lytle came out of retirement for this comic company because he drew, this is a comic called Wolf's Head, which is a werewolf story based on Robert E. Howard's writings. This was a comic from Cross Plains. I think it lasted 2 issues, and Steve Lytle drew them all. Maybe 1 issue, actually. I really like this one. Colin McNeil, the English cartoonist. I guess, to be more exact, he's Scottish. Almost very Mignola-esque, even. Really nice cartooning. And then we have an article about Robert E. Howard's girlfriend. They only dated for like a year, but she wrote the book about Robert E. Howard. You know, like, I think the book was called One Who Walked Alone. And it was made into a movie called The Whole Wide World. I saw that movie back in the 90s, I think it was. And was weird. I think it was Vincent D'Onofrio played Robert E. Howard. Maybe? That could be a false memory, but... yeah, Robert E. Howard was an interesting character. You know, this big He-Man, built like a linebacker, but he just sat in his mom's house writing these stories for pulp fiction magazines like Weird Tales, and he was very successful. And this is just an article about her whole life. She was apparently a very great educator. She had, of course, a lot going on other than just dating Robert E. Howard for a year. Here's the book that she wrote. And here we have another little tiny poem by Robert E. Howard. It's 4 lines. And this is adapted by Raphael Conan. And he takes this poem that Robert E. Howard wrote and kind of makes it about Robert E. Howard. Here we have a nice little bonus, a little sketch by Jeffrey Jones. I don't know if this is like from 1971 or something, you know. This could be from some fanzine. Or maybe he made it for them, for this. And there's the back cover, nicely designed. See what I was talking about? He-Man Robert E. Howard. He was quite a He-Man. And that's it. This is such a curious comic. It's almost amazing that this comic company existed for like a year. And they put out such a nice production. I mean, and it's just very classy looking. Because, you know, usually you think of Conan, Savage Sword of Conan or something. It's like, yeah, this is like a guy who has an airbrush van with a barbarian on the side is going to read. That's the comic he's going to go for. But this is like very like classy, got all these great artists. They just have a Tim Sale. That's kind of odd for like a Robert E. Howard type comic. So if you can find it, I bet you can. I don't think this sold anything. It was probably too pricey. Because, you know, at this time, comics were still like $2, your average comic. It is a really nice production. Like I said, it's probably 48 to 64 pages. Pretty fat for a pamphlet comic. But man, nice, hard, good paper stock, you know. So if you see this in a quarter bin or a dollar bin, I guess they call them now. I forget how old I am. It's definitely worth picking up. I mean, just for the Corben story, which I don't think has ever been reprinted. I don't know if it'll ever will be, because it's owned by the Robert E. Howard estate. So, yeah, hope you liked it. And I hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.